Chapter 176. Chinamo looked at the youngster in front of him. Normal? Even though I had never read such a novel, I knew that this was not normal. Was it on purpose? How could this be? Fujio didn't admit it. She opened the book calmly and smiled wantonly. Look, this is what's written here. Fantasizing that all men in the world only love their own novels? Chinmo's slender fingers tapped on the sentence. Although there are many people who like me. They line up from my class to the school gate. His eyes turned cold. Fujio replied lazily. That's nothing. Every time Brother Mo goes to school, the crowd is bigger than this. Even the school leaders line up to see you, so it's not strange. In that instant, Chinamo felt a little speechless. There was still a smile on Fujio's thin lips. Finally, there was a topic that could make the Almighty choke. She wanted to continue. How could Chinamo allow the youngster to poison his nerves again? Just hearing the name Ouyang Yuqian made him want to close the book. Looking at the youngster's expression, he arched a brow. Very proud? Nope. Fujio chuckled. She finally knew the weakness of a straight-A student. The Almighty, who studied psychology, couldn't stand Mary Sullivan the most. Chinamo reached out and pinched the youngster's chin. His eyes darkened. You're smiling so much that your canine teeth are showing. How can you say you're not proud? Crack. Li Xiaodong did not expect to see such a scene as soon as he came in. His hand trembled and the bowl fell. He really didn't expect that young Master Qin would teach his young master a lesson by kissing. Chen Xiaodong swallowed hard. That posture was clearly a sign of kissing. What's the matter? What's more, the person asking the question wasn't their young master, but young Master Qin. That kind of devilish and handsome side profile made it easy for people to think the wrong way. No. Chen Xiaodong didn't have much confidence. Then he thought of something and said, My young master asked me to prepare a guest room for young Master Qin. I've already prepared it. Young Master Qin, do you want to rest there? Or wait a bit? Fujio really didn't understand why his little housekeeper was stuttering like baby Feng. Was he scared by the Almighty? Guest room? Chinamo lifted the corners of his eyes. Who said I wanted to stay in the guest room? Chen Xiaodong paused. Where else should I live? I'll share a room with your young master, Chinamo said casually. Chen Xiaodong's jaw dropped as if he was struck by lightning. Sleep in the same room? What? Is there a problem? Chinamo held a cigarette between his fingers and flicked it into the ashtray. His gaze was as calm as water as he glanced at him. Chen Xiaodong's heart skipped a beat when he saw that look. He didn't even look at his young master's expression and immediately said, Of course there's no problem. I'll go get another pillow for young Master Qin now. Chen Xiaodong really didn't think that the two of them would sleep together. He felt that it was inappropriate, but he really didn't dare to disobey young Master Qin's order. Most importantly, this was an opportunity for the young master. Chapter 177. Fujio glanced at him with a cold smile. I really have to thank you for your understanding. Starting tomorrow, your salary will be halved. Chen Xiaodong. Why did young master still deduct his salary after he did the right thing? Why? When Fujio threw the quilt on the bed, she felt helpless. She really had a stupid teammate. She had to control the little butler's messy thoughts in the future, or it would be too dangerous. Brother Mo, you can sleep in my room. I'll sleep in the guest room. Fujio turned her head and smiled at Chinamo. I've been drinking, so I have a strong smell on me. You probably can't get used to it. Chinamo pulled back the young man who was trying to escape. He grabbed Fujio's arm and pressed him against the wall. His handsome face was so close that there was no room for a third person. What? You don't want to sleep in the same bed with me? Such a straightforward question was a little hard to answer. Any random girl can sleep in your bed. Why can't your brother? Chinamo said this in a very low voice. There was no warmth in his deep eyes. Fujio was very clear that she had to answer at this moment. Of course. Then wash yourself clean before you go to bed. Don't let me smell any alcohol on you. Or do you prefer to shower with me? Chinamo didn't wear a tie, and 2 buttons on his shirt were unbuttoned. His black hair matched his handsome and fair face, and his presence was especially strong. He had an extremely lazy expression, as if saying, "Take your time to choose, I'm not in a hurry." Fu Jiu knew that she couldn't escape this time, so she smiled handsomely. "Brother Mo, shower first. I'll make the bed." No matter what, she had to find a thicker quilt, or it would be dangerous. Showers usually didn't take long. When Qin Mo came out, Fu Jiu had almost finished arranging the bed. She deliberately placed a plush toy in the middle to prevent the same situation from happening when she woke up the next morning. The Almighty didn't find fault with her. Fu Jiu took the towel into the bathroom. After locking the door, she began to take off her school uniform and bandages. She took a hot shower, changed her clothes, and walked out. His hair wasn't washed, but it was still damp. His messy silver hair would only make people feel that it was luxurious. Fu Jiu didn't like wearing slippers, especially after her shower. She casually stepped on the wooden floor and walked over with a smile on her face. It was an ordinary action, but when she did it, she looked very handsome. A long time ago, Qin Mo had already felt that the youngster was extremely fair. Now, when he looked at the pair of bare feet, they were like porcelain jade. Even his nails had been trimmed to a smooth and glossy sheen. His eyes couldn't help but sink before he shifted his gaze away. After the experience of sharing the same bed last time, Fu Jiu naturally turned off the lights and lay down. He wasn't sure if it was because the lights were off, but the faint aroma of alcohol and the sweetness of the shower gel gradually became clearer with the youngster's breathing. It seemed to brush against his left ear, but the youngster didn't notice. He smiled at him. "Brother Mo, do you want me to read you another bedtime story?" Chapter 178. Because of this thought, Qin Mo frowned heavily. His dark eyes were so deep that they seemed to reflect the light in the room. Seeing that Qin Mo didn't say anything, Fu Jiu wanted to take a closer look. Unexpectedly, as soon as she moved, the man pressed her down with one hand. He was on top of her, holding her wrist with his fingers, and his breath was a little hot. Except for the faint light outside, it was dark everywhere in the bedroom. That was why Qin Mo's eyes looked even colder and deeper. He was like a vigilant beast, exuding a dangerous and beautiful luster when hunting. The two of them were so close that Fu Jiu could clearly see the excessively long eyelashes on the man's face. He just looked at her, his eyes like the deep well water, tempting her to fall in if she wasn't careful. "If you move again, you'll get out. Now close your eyes and sleep." His fingers seemed to have exerted a little more force, and even his voice was filled with a deep warning. Then, Fu Jiu was pressed against Qin Mo's chest. In an instant, the man's minty tobacco smell seeped into her nose. It was familiar yet strange. She was half a head shorter than the man, and her eyes fell on his perfect jawline. She could even see his Adam's apple moving slightly when he spoke. Being pressed in the man's arms like this, she really couldn't move around. Luckily, she put a plush toy on the bed, which could put some distance between the two of them. But Qin Mo only felt that the person in his arms was very soft, like soft cotton candy. Even the smell was so sweet that it made him want to use a little more strength to crush the young man. Even though this thought was wrong, Qin Mo couldn't control his intuition. Luckily, the young man was quiet, and the head in front of his chest was very obedient. He was different from all the people he had interacted with before. The young man not only looked good, but also smelled good, so Qin Mo didn't dislike this position. Instead, he felt that it was a good way to sleep. Whether it was the touch of his hands or the smell of his breath, they were all good for sleep. The night was getting darker and darker, and it was already dawn. The scene of two equally handsome people sleeping on the bed was very beautiful, especially when Fu Jiu's silver hair contrasted with Qin Mo's black hair, creating a stunning effect. If there was a cameraman here, he would definitely take a picture of them. Such a scene would definitely attract countless fans on TV. As the sun rose, Fu Jiu slowly opened her eyes. She reached out and rubbed her left eye. 2 or 3 strands of her silver hair were sticking out. She tilted her head and looked to her side. The Almighty was still sleeping. That face that could turn all living things upside down was noble, elegant, and superbly crafted. He just lay there quietly, with his slender hands folded elegantly in front of his chest. His long and thick eyelashes cast a dark shadow, and his entire body exuded an aura of nobility that no one could approach. His slightly curled lips seemed to be filled with indescribable mockery towards them, the slacker students. The more Fujio looked at him, the more she felt that when God was creating things, he must have treated the Almighty as his own son. She reached out her hand, wanting to poke the man's bewitching face. But in the next, she felt of something she God to say, God and came. Chapter 179. Auntie, why did it have to come today? Fujio looked at the blood-stained pajama pants, and her eyes darkened. She tore them off and rinsed her body with hot water. Her lower abdomen warmed up, but she couldn't find anything to protect herself with, so she simply folded a layer of soft paper to replace it. But she wasn't sure if the bed sheets were dirty. Fujio looked at herself in the mirror with pale lips and frowned. This thing came at the right time. But she was also glad that it wasn't when the Almighty was tutoring her yesterday. Otherwise, she would have been caught red-handed, and she would have been in deep trouble. Fujio pulled out the skincare products on the side, took out a stick of men's lip balm, and applied it on her lips, just to make herself look less pale. Fujio's face was pale, but she didn't look as pale as before. At this moment, Chin-mo opened his cold and deep eyes because of the noise in the bathroom. He lifted the quilt and narrowed his eyes. What's this? Bloodstains? In the bathroom, Fujio looked at her long legs and wiped them with a piece of tissue. She put on her school pants and glanced at the residue in the wastebasket. Since she wasn't sure if there were any on the bedsheets, she might as well leave these things in a more obvious way. Thinking of this, Fujio took a piece of tissue and stuffed it into her nose. After she felt that it was enough, she walked out of the bathroom. As soon as she walked out, she saw the man's deep eyes staring at the dirty bedsheets. His side profile was dangerous. Fujio walked over naturally and yawned lazily. Brother Mo, my nose is bleeding. Did it stain your clothes? Chin-mo turned back, looking at the youngster's slightly curled silver hair and that innocent face. He then noticed that there was a piece of tissue stuffed in his red nose. He frowned and pulled him over. Why is your nose bleeding? Maybe it was because he had just woken up, but the man's voice was deep and lingering. Fujio could actually hear the concern in his voice. She curled her thin lips and said, It's probably because of the exams and the esports competition, so I'm a little hot. Plus, the weather hasn't been good lately, and the smog is so thick that it's like this. I just bled a lot, and I couldn't stop it. I was afraid that Brother Mo would find it dirty. It had to be said that our Lord Jio's extremely lethal face looked exactly like whatever he pretended to be. You are my little brother. Chin-mo's voice was very calm. He reached out his hand to press on the back of Fujio's head, as if he was going to stop the youngster's bleeding himself. Fujio raised her hand to block his view. What a joke. If the Almighty took a closer look at her, he would definitely know that she was lying. She knew better than anyone how hard it was to fool a man like this. Don't look dirty, the bleeding has stopped. Fujio covered her nose and smiled lightly. Brother Mo, don't worry. Chin-mo listened to the youngster's low and muffled voice and suddenly felt that he wasn't a good brother. He had already said that he would take good care of him, but such a situation still happened. Fujio didn't know what the Almighty was thinking, but no matter what, the bloodstain incident was finally explained. But for the next 3 days, it was best for her to stay away from the Almighty. Her body was on the cold side, so it wasn't easy for her to move around when she was on her period. Chapter 180. The pain in her lower abdomen was still there, but no one could detect the change in Fujio no matter who looked at her. Just like Chin-mo said, people like Fujio were the most difficult to understand. During breakfast, there was a big plate of fruits on the table, and most of them were pears. Chen Xiaodong leaned over and whispered to her, Young Master Qin had these delivered directly from the hotel. He said that young master is suffering from internal heat, so eat more of these. He swore he didn't think too much. But what happened last night that made young master suffer from internal heat? Fujio raised her eyebrows and looked at the fruit plate in front of her. Pears were cool. All women knew that this kind of fruit was the worst thing to eat during menstruation. Fujio didn't even dare to drink cold water during this period, let alone eat pears. But this time, Fujio pinched a piece with a smile and put it in her mouth. Not bad. It's delicious. Thank you, Brother Mo. Chin-mo retracted his gaze from the young man's face and asked someone to bring up another bowl of soup. The effect of the soup was the same. All the effects were to reduce internal heat and remove the haze. There were lilies in the soup, so Fujio really didn't want to drink it. But with the Almighty's cleverness, it wasn't as if he didn't realize it, and he would react later. So she had to put on a show. Fujio raised her head and drank the cold soup. Chinamo watched the young man finish drinking, so he could see Fujio's hesitation. He raised his eyebrows. You don't like lilies? I rarely eat them. Fujio curled her lips. I'm a picky eater. Chinamo nodded, his voice calm. The rebellious phase of youth. Fujio. What did this have to do with rebellious youth? After eating the snow pear and drinking the lily soup, her eyes became much brighter, and she wasn't afraid of the haze anymore. But her lower abdomen was so painful that she didn't want to move at all. This was also what she couldn't let the Almighty find out. Plus, there was a physics class in the morning. If the teacher didn't take attendance, it might affect the results of this monthly test. After breakfast, Fujio stood up with one hand in her school uniform pocket. She smiled faintly, and she didn't look any different. Chinamo took her to school, and before he left, he told the driver, bring the fruit plate and cold soup to young Master Joe again at noon. Yes. The driver nodded. Fujio listened on the side. She had already decided to give away the lunch that the Almighty had given her. She absolutely could not touch those two things again. She was in so much pain right now. Before her lips turned completely pale, Fujio pushed the car door open and got out. She waved at Chinamo and waited until the car behind her disappeared completely. Only then did Fujio stretch out her hand to cover her stomach. Her silver hair hung down, covering her beautiful eyes. Because it was done through the school uniform jacket, many people thought that the young man was having a stomachache. However, the young man's back was still very handsome, and the way he carried his school bag on one shoulder made many girls want to go up and talk to His Highness Joe. However, it was obvious. Fujio wasn't in a good mood today. After she entered the classroom, she put on her school uniform's hood and laid on the desk at the back, revealing only the side of her extremely pale face. A few girls glanced behind them. Is Highness Joe sick? I think so. Chapter 181. Why don't we do it today? Anyway, young Master Fu said that as long as we bring that arrogant pervert to him, he will give us a lot of benefits. Think about it, how disgusting that pervert is. Not only does he like men, but he sits at the same table with that fat pig. His grades are terrible, and he's pulling down the average score of our class. When he walks, he doesn't seem to care about us at all. It's so funny. Why doesn't he take a look at what he used to be like? How dare he flirt in front of us? The person who spoke had been holding a grudge against Fujio for a long time. Now that there was a chance, he would of course incite others to do it. He couldn't wait to see Fujio kneel on the ground and beg for mercy. She dared to kick him in the classroom in front of so many people. She was simply courting death. All right, we'll listen to you. After the physics class is over and the people in front of the classroom have left, I'll block the back door, and you guys block the front door. This time, we'll let him have a taste of what it means to never return. Just like that, a premeditated plan was quietly born. No one knew that in the classroom, a few people had already decided to plan a nasty kidnapping. Fujio only felt uncomfortable. Every girl knew what it felt like to have her period. Her lower body was moist. She really wanted to go to the bathroom, but it wasn't safe for her to go there in this state. Plus, she was really in pain and tired. Soon, her forehead was covered in a thin layer of sweat. During this time, Shui Yaoyao came to the back of the classroom. Seeing Fujio's restless sleep, she thought of a way to get some hot water for her. When Fujio raised her head, the corner of her mouth was still curled up. Because she had just woken up, her voice was a little hoarse, deep and pleasant. What's wrong? He looked very handsome. Because of his illness, the young man's skin was even whiter, which made him look like a handsome prince in distress. It was heart-wrenching. Perhaps only the young man could still look so good in this state. Your Highness Joe, if you really don't feel well, why don't you lie down in the infirmary for a while and let the doctor take a look? Shui Yaoyao said worriedly. Fujio shook her head. I'm fine. She can't see the school doctor in this state. It will be easy for others to notice. Then drink some hot water first? Shui Yaoyao knows that no one can change the young man's mind. Fujio took the hot water and said with a smile, Thank you. It was probably because of the hot water. Although his stomach still hurt, at least he didn't feel cold. It was just that her body was extremely tired. Fu Jiu sat in the back and fell into a half-awake state again. She finally made it to the 4th period of physics class. No matter how uncomfortable she felt during this class, she couldn't fall asleep. But what he didn't expect was that the moment the stick landed, Fu Jiu dodged and raised her leg, kicking hard on his knee. Lu Zongming was in so much pain that his face turned pale. In an instant, he knelt on the ground. The surrounding people were all dumbfounded. "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and do it." Lu Zongming hugged his knees, gritted his teeth and growled, "Think about the benefits young Master Fu has given us." Young Master Fu? Even though she was extremely uncomfortable, Fu Jiu didn't let go of this very important piece of information. It turned out that the illegitimate son was the main culprit. Fu Jiu bent down and dodged another incoming stick. Chapter 183. Thinking of this, Fu Jiu glanced at the back door. After seeing Fu Jiu's gaze, Lu Zongming quickly shouted at the two people at the back door, "This perverted gay wants to run, lock the door." But he didn't expect that Fu Jiu didn't run to the back door. Instead, she picked up the broom in her hand and used the inertia of her body to whip two people in the right ribs. It was so painful that the two of them screamed out loud. The remaining four on the side swung their wooden sticks at Fu Jiu. But at this moment, Fu Jiu turned around and jumped onto the window next to her. She was so fast that it was as if a gust of wind had blown past her. When she jumped down, she didn't forget to push the wooden table back, and she slammed into the person who was following closely behind her. Then, Fu Jiu braked hard with her right heel and tapped on the ground. Her white school uniform was like a pair of wings that spread out, making the young man look more than just handsome. Class 1's classroom was on the 1st floor, so it wasn't hard to jump out of the window. But there weren't many people who could do it as beautifully as Fu Jiu. Lu Zongming also wanted to jump out of the window, but he was too strong, so he was squeezed by the window. He stared at Fu Jiu outside the window, his heart burning with anger. F***CK. They had sent 7 people, but not only did they not gain the upper hand, but they were also beaten up to this state. Lu Zongming looked back and saw that he was half limping. The others were lying on the ground in disarray, and the pain was unbearable. That gay. How could he be so good at fighting? Wasn't he not feeling well today? Fu Jiu was indeed in pain. Not only was she sweating profusely from the pain in her abdomen, but because of her movements just now, waves of coldness swept through her entire body. And she was 100% sure that her school uniform pants were really dirty. Fu Jiu touched her back and opened her hands. They were all sticky to the touch. Any girl would know what this meant. But she, who had just jumped out of the back window, didn't notice that someone was standing behind her. This person had witnessed the whole process, including the scene where Fu Jiu was surrounded, and the large pool of blood on the back of Fu Jiu's pants. This person was none other than Shui Yao Yao, who had bought the stomach medicine for Fu Jiu. She stood there, staring at the smear of red, and could not help but be stunned. That kind of place was definitely not the place to be injured. They had always thought that Highness Jiu was pressing his stomach because of a stomachache. Now, Shui Yao Yao thought, she finally knew why His Highness Jiu was lying on the table like that, plus His Highness Jiu's refusal to go to the infirmary. Many details added together, it seemed more and more like an answer. But no matter how much he knew, it couldn't compare to a girl's understanding of a girl. Some things, as long as it was a girl, they would understand at first sight. His Highness Jiu, Shui Yao Yao couldn't say the shocking answer. The bowl of noodle soup in her hand fell to the ground. After hearing the noise, Fu Jiu quickly turned around, and her thin eyes met Shui Yao Yao's shocked face. Shui Yao Yao looked at the young man in front of her. He was still so handsome, so clean and handsome that people couldn't look at him directly. He had a habit of never zipping up his school uniform. Chapter 184. He wasn't him but her. Even Shui Yao Yao's fingers were trembling. Her pupils shook and she murmured, "Your Highness Jiu." Fu Jiu didn't panic at all. Instead, she smiled at Shui Yao Yao and walked to her. She took out a piece of tissue and wiped her scalded fingers. Her thin lips were pale, but her voice was still smiling. "Next time you play games, you have to take care of your fingers. Don't forget, we still need to dominate the gaming contest. Shui Yao Yao really didn't know what to say. Such a handsome and carefree person really didn't look like a normal girl. If she hadn't seen that scene just now, even if there was a little blood on His Highness Jiao, she wouldn't have thought that way. She wouldn't even dare to guess that Fu Jiao was a girl. Fu Jiao reached out and tucked Shui Yao Yao's messy black hair behind her ear. She said in a low voice, "Can you keep this a secret for me?" Shui Yao Yao looked up and saw the young man looking down at her. His side profile was still handsome and gentle, but probably because she wasn't feeling well, the silver hair in front of her forehead was already wet with sweat, revealing a sickly paleness. Even her eyes had lost their vitality, but they were still very bright, so bright that it made people's hearts palpitate. Shui Yao Yao nodded hard. She looked behind Fu Jiao, took off her school jacket, and handed it to Fu Jiao. Seeing that the young man was still looking at her, Shui Yao Yao lowered her voice. "Wrap this around your waist, and no one will be able to tell. I'll hold your jacket for you." "Thank you." Fu Jiao smiled, but the corners of her mouth were still a little pale. She tied the sleeves of her school uniform around her waist, making her legs look even more slender, making her look even more handsome and devilish. Shui Yao Yao looked at her face. "I put painkillers in the classroom, as well as heat packs, and I'll go get them for you." "No need." Fu Jiao grabbed her arm and looked behind her. "It's not peaceful in the classroom." Shui Yao Yao saw the scene just now, and of course she knew who the culprit was. "It's all my fault. If it weren't for me, His Highness Jiao wouldn't have become enemies with Lu Zongming." "It's not because of you." Fu Jiao smiled, her lips turning whiter and whiter. "They're here for me. I've been paid to get rid of this disaster." Shui Yao Yao was even more shocked. His Highness Jiao means that they were ordered by someone? A young boy in puberty couldn't swallow his anger and wanted to teach me a lesson. Plus, he didn't have a good heart. At this point, Fu Jiao's eyes turned cold. "You always play dirty tricks. That's why you came up with such a plan to ambush me at school." His afternoon class. Shui Yao Yao turned. "I've already asked for the afternoon class." Fu Jiao pressed her hand on her belly and smiled wickedly and dangerously. "Of course, it's not because of them. When I'm better, I'll deal with them slowly." Xiao looked at Fu's. And she. Fu Highness Shui. For a long time, she had enjoyed too much of His Highness Jiao's gentleness. The only thing she could do to repay His Highness Jiao was to choose silence when it was time to be silent. However, there was one thing that she had to confirm first in order to ensure that she would not expose herself. Chapter 185. Fu Jiao laughed. "If he knew about this, he would kill me. The Almighty doesn't like to interact with girls." Shui Yao Yao finally understood why the young man used to look at boys in a weird way. Everyone said he was gay, but he wasn't. He was supposed to like boys. But His Highness Jiao was different. Shui Yao Yao didn't know how to describe that feeling. It was like she had a new soul. But if young Master Qin didn't know now, she was worried that His Highness Jiao would be in danger when he found out. After all, the Qin family was too powerful in Jiang City. Almighty Qin didn't like to be cheated. Everyone in Jiang City knew this. His Highness Jiao was too bold. Shui Yao Yao thought about it. "What about the time you changed on the court?" "I wasn't discovered. The Almighty is a neat freak." Fu Jiao curled up her lips, which was very beautiful. "I blew into his ear, and he almost stuffed me into the trash can." Shui Yao Yao. Was a man's ear supposed to be blown? So His Highness Jiao not only knew how to flirt with girls, but also Almighty Qin. Shui Yao Yao, who had a new understanding of Fu Jiao, glanced at the young man beside her. At this time, the young man had recovered some energy. He walked forward with a smile, and no one could tell that he was wearing the school uniform to cover his awkward position. It only made him look cooler and more handsome. Shui Yao Yao couldn't help but wonder what kind of man could subdue a girl like His Highness Jiao. Inexplicably, a noble figure appeared in Shui Yao Yao's mind. If it was Almighty Qin, that would be very interesting. Fu Jiao didn't know what Shui Yao Yao was imagining. She only knew that Shui Yao Yao was smiling happily. She raised her eyebrows. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." It was better not to tell His Highness Jiao about this. After all, it was just her imagination. The after effect of her period was that Fu Jiao slept the entire afternoon at home. After school, Chen Xiaodong pushed the door open several times, but all he saw was the bulging quilt in the bedroom and the young man's exposed silver hair. Even he didn't know what happened to Fu Jiao. He just thought that his young master was too tired from playing games. On the other side, Lu Zongming's knee was still hurting, and he was even limping when he walked. The people around him were all badly battered. Ming, how are we going to explain this to young Master Fu? We can't possibly say that we didn't even beat that perverted trash. Can I still get paid that way? Lu Zongming was infuriated. Use your brain and think about it. If this gets out, how are we going to show our faces in number 1 middle school? Isn't it embarrassing? Then what do you think we should say? That person was also anxious. This matter was more than embarrassing. If the girls knew about it, they would laugh to death. Lu Zongming narrowed his eyes. Then, he took out his phone from his pocket and called Fu Ximing. Chapter 186. After Fu Ximing heard Lu Zongming's words, he laughed and said with complete contempt, "That sounds like something that trash would do. That guy has always been timid, so there's no need to kidnap him. You guys deal with him as you see fit. Sooner or later, he will return to school. When that time comes, I think you know what to do." Yes. Lu Zongming agreed verbally, but his expression was unnatural. He understood what young Master Fu meant. He wanted him to keep an eye on Fu Jiao and cause her trouble when the time came. It would be best if he could beat her up until she ran away like she did today. But what he said on the phone was not the truth. However, he couldn't afford to offend young Master Fu, so he had no choice but to bluff his way through. Fu Ximing still didn't know what was going on. After hanging up, he waved his phone at the team behind him. "Did you hear that? That trash is a coward. Young Master Fu has a way." The members of the battle team all started laughing, their voices ear-piercing. "If this goes on, that upstart will definitely be killed. Who asked him to provoke so many people? Why did he have to provoke us? Did he really think he was a capable person? All right, let's not talk about him anymore. It's a waste of time. Think about the team's strategy. This time, we've cancelled the internal selection, and even young Master Fu can participate in the competition. I suggest giving the position of captain to young Master Fu. This is a good suggestion." I agree. With young Master Fu leading us in the esports selection contest, who would dare to fight for first place with us? Fu Ximing looked at the people around him as if he had already won. His voice was very calm. "It's just a small selection contest. Don't worry, I'm sure I'll get first place." As his voice fell, there was a burst of jubilation in the company. Fu Zhongyi and his friends from the media happened to pass by. Looking at his son, he was full of pride. "You heard it too. Looks like Ximing is determined to get it. I heard that young Master Fu still has a secret move that he hasn't announced yet. President Fu, what kind of secret move is it? Is it not convenient for you to reveal anything?" The media also wanted to dig out some valuable news. After all, the competition would start in 5 days. Fu Zhongyi smiled mysteriously and lowered his voice. "Do you know Spade Z?" It was night, and the clouds were everywhere. At this time in Jiang City, people were wearing masks when they went out. The visibility was extremely low. Fu Jiao was still sleeping. This time, it was a little better. Her face was exposed, but she was still in a deep sleep. She didn't even know that Qin Mo had come. "He's been sleeping since he came back?" Qin Mo glanced at the youngster on the bed and arched a brow at Chen Xiaodong, who was standing beside him. When Chen Xiaodong saw that young Master Qin was looking at him, he immediately said, "That's not it." During dinner, young Master woke up and ate a lot, but he went back to sleep after eating. "You mean his appetite is normal?" Qin Mo took another look at the youngster. Indeed, he didn't see anything on his face. However, because he had slept too well, his face was slightly pink. Chen Xiaodong grunted. He drank 3 bowls of hot soup, ate 2 bowls of rice, half a plate of dumplings, a lot of soy sauce beef, and some organic cauliflower. Young Master usually eats this much, so it's normal. This time, it was Secretary Liang who came with Qin Mo. After hearing what Chen Xiaodong said, the The corner of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. Such a big appetite is normal? But what worried him the most was his CEO. He went straight to the Fu house right after work. What was going on? Chapter 187. Chinamo didn't care who was looking at him. He turned sideways, took off the black glove on his right hand, and put his palm on Fujio's forehead. When the cold touch hit her, Fujio moved back a little, but she didn't wake up. She just shrunk her handsome face even more. Her silver hair was still sticking out, and she still looked noble. Chinmo's eyes darkened, and he pressed the quilt down again. Secretary Liang was very confused. Since when did their CEO learn to take care of people like this? There was no problem with the temperature, and the surface of the body was normal, so it wasn't a cold or a fever. It was probably because of the intense studying recently, and the young man's physical strength couldn't take it. He was still growing, and some things didn't need to be perfect. Thinking of this, Chinamo took his hand back. He tore up the fill-in-the-blanks that he had prepared for the young man today, and threw them into the trash can. Although full marks were important, his little brother didn't need full marks. He could afford it anyway, as long as he didn't embarrass him too much. It was the first time Secretary Liang saw their CEO Qin tear up a piece of paper, and he couldn't help but be curious about what it was. Chinamo glanced at him at this moment. His eyes were extremely cold. It made Secretary Liang's thoughts go back to normal. Chinamo didn't say anything. His handsome face was as cold as ever, and his eyes were on Chen Xiaodong. Take good care of your young master. Yes. Chen Xiaodong really couldn't tell what he was feeling. From the moment Almighty Qin appeared, he felt like the world was a fantasy. Young Master Qin, he wouldn't really turn gay for his young master, right? Secretary Liang had the same feeling as Chen Xiaodong. For CEO Qin, who had an international conference in a while, what could be more important than business? But CEO Qin still came in person, and he stayed for more than 20 minutes. The young man was sleeping, and the CEO was watching. That scene. It was as if he and that little housekeeper of the Fu family didn't exist. Should he tell Madam and Boss about this? It was such a difficult choice. Why did the CEO have to like him? The useless young master of the Fu family. Fujio was sleeping soundly, and she didn't know so many things had happened that night. She didn't know what it was like for other people to have their period, and she hated it the most. On one hand, it was the natural enemy of a cross-dressing woman. On the other hand, apart from the pain, she also wanted to sleep. The next day was still very uncomfortable. Fujio continued to ask for leave. She didn't even leave the bedroom, and she even locked the door from the inside, just to get rid of some blood evidence. It was not until dusk that she regained her energy and prepared a bowl of hot soup to drink. Chen Xiaodong stopped her sternly. Young master, tell me the truth. You and young Master Qin. Are you two already together? What do you think? Fujio didn't answer him directly. Instead, she put her hands in her pockets and smiled. It's time to test your intelligence. Think about it carefully. Chen Xiaodong. Why did he feel that the young master was treating him like a toy? How could he be so casual? Lu Zongming didn't dare to refuse. He realized that when Fujio was angry, there was a natural coldness that made people afraid. Even though he was smiling, his eyes were as dark as the night, empty and full of hostility. Lu Zongming's hands were trembling as he placed the phone in Fujio's palm. Chapter 190. When he heard that familiar voice, he felt a chill down his spine. Fu Shiming, who was standing in the classroom, froze. Why was Lu Zongming's phone in the hands of this trash? Fujio was still laughing, and her voice was deep and pleasant. Honestly, I'm really curious. Don't you feel like you're being slapped in the face when others call you young Master Fu? Your name isn't on the Fu family's genealogy. Oh right, it should be said that even your mother didn't marry into the Fu family. It's a pity that after so many years of planning, she still has to live outside and be a mistress. You! Fujio, who do you think you are? Who do you think your mother is? Our whole family came from the countryside. Dad didn't want your mother for a long time, But your mother still doesn't let go. Do you really think you're so great? You're just a prodigal son whose company is about to close down, and you still dare to clamor in front of me? Fu Ximing stood up in anger. His fingers paused, and he gripped the carbon pen in his hand tightly. Fu Jiu, who do you think you are? Where does your confidence come from? Compared to Fu Ximing's exasperation, Fu Jiu's voice was much more languid. Fu Ximing, go back and tell Fu Zhongyi to return all his shares and assets. My mom will immediately kick him out. Let's get to the bottom of this. Who's the one holding on to whose things? Also, illegitimate son of Fu, if you want to fight, do it yourself. Isn't it funny to find someone else to do it for you? After saying that, Fu Jiu hung up the phone and threw it back into Lu Zongming's arms. She tilted her head and put on her mask, revealing the evil smile in her eyes. She casually put her hands in the pockets of her school uniform and slowly walked out of the alley. Her back view was very cool, as if she hadn't just beaten someone up, but fed a kitten by the roadside. Fu Ximing was so angry that his handsome face was also extremely cold. He wanted to say a few more words, but he found that the other party had already hung up the line. This made him even more intolerable, but when he called back again, he had already changed people. Lu Zongming, who had just stood up, picked up the phone. Young Master Fu. What the hell is going on? Fu Ximing lowered his voice, and his eyes were frighteningly gloomy. Why would that trash use your phone to call me? Didn't you say it was all settled? Lu Zongming gritted his teeth in pain and said guiltily, Young Master Fu, it's not because of me, it's because of Fu Jiu. I don't know where he learned how to do this, but he's so ruthless when he hits people. My leg was almost broken by his kicks, and that day. Actually, there were 7 or 8 of us, but we didn't surround him, and we even had to rest for a few days. Enough. The more Fu Ximing listened, the more venomous his eyes became. Everyone knows how incompetent that pervert is. How could 7 or 8 people not be able to surround him? Chapter 192. The other people who mocked Fu Jiu had the same thought. They looked at each other, laughed mockingly, and then lowered their heads to continue with their papers. Since there was still a lot of time left, the invigilator had nothing to do, so he simply picked up the only test paper on the podium and started reading. He didn't expect that Fu Jiu would get the first question right. The invigilator didn't care much. He treated it as a way to kill time and continued reading. She got the second question right. The third question was also correct. The fourth, the fifth. Even the reading questions were correct. The more the invigilator read, the bigger his eyes became. His pupils shook violently, and even his face showed extreme shock and astonishment. All of them were correct. How was this possible? The candidates didn't know what happened to the invigilator, but he suddenly stood up. They thought that he had caught something, so the cheaters were scared out of their wits and immediately pulled their phones back. Who would have thought that the invigilator would just stand there and murmur, "Full marks, this must be a full marks." What full marks? What was the teacher talking about? The candidates were all dumbfounded. The good thing was that the invigilator was obviously not in the right state today, so they cheated and copied a few more questions. The exam lasted the entire day, from morning to afternoon. This day might have been especially torturous for others, but for Fu Jiu, there was one good thing. She could go in and out of the bathroom freely during the exam. Anyway, she was always the first to teach the test paper. The last exam was physics, which was Fu Jiu's only shortcoming. Compared to the other exams, she was much more serious about this one. The invigilator happened to be the one who taught Fu Jiu and the others physics. She also saw Fu Jiu, but for her, she only cared about the results of those good students, so she didn't pay much attention to the back. When the test papers were handed out, Fu Jiu did the big questions first. She glanced at them and thought in her heart, "Awesome, my brother." All the questions were correctly answered by the Almighty. In the future exams, she would worship the Almighty. This was much more useful than worshipping Buddha. Fu Jiu curled up her lips and started to answer the questions with a carbon pen. The light outside shone on the young man's fair, almost transparent face through the glass. At that moment, one could almost see the tranquil gentleness of time. It was said that serious men were the most handsome. He didn't expect a serious young man to be even more handsome. The girl sitting next to Fu Jiu couldn't help it anymore. After the teacher walked over, she pressed the silent button on her phone and secretly took a photo of His Highness Jiu. Chapter 197. The teacher walked in with the test papers. Her face didn't look too good. Not only that, but there was an indescribable seriousness in her expression. Class representative, come up and hand out the test papers. After the physics teacher said this, she looked at the seat at the back and said in a cold tone, Fujio, come out with me. The students present were all dumbfounded by this completely opposite attitude. After all the teachers in front of them were praising Fu Jiu, which completely hit them. But when it came to the physics teacher, the situation was like this. Was it because Fu Jiu's grades were too bad? That couldn't be right. In the past, no matter how bad Fu Jiu's grades were, the teacher would still be very calm. Everyone could see that she had given up on Fu Jiu a long time ago. It seemed like she didn't care about Fu Jiu's grades. But looking at the teacher's behavior today, it didn't seem like it was because of the grades. But if it wasn't because of the grades, then what was it? Fu Jiu also raised her eyebrows. She put away her books and walked out of the classroom with her back straight. The physics teacher didn't say much. She walked all the way out without a trace of a smile on her face. She directly brought the young man into the grade office. Before Fu Jiu walked in, she could hear the noise coming from inside. I don't believe that a last-place student like him can get such good grades. First place in the grade? The students in our Class A who went to the Olympiad only got full marks in 2 subjects. What about him? Full marks in 5 subjects. Let's not talk about anything else. Let's talk about his physics. How did he get full marks? Even their teacher Zhang said that Fu Jiu's grades in physics couldn't be any worse, and that she couldn't even memorize a formula. But look at the result. Full marks? There was definitely something wrong here. The physics teacher paused for a moment before pushing the door open and walking in. Instantly, the office quieted down. But the teacher's expressions didn't change at all. Everyone's faces showed that they weren't convinced. After seeing Fu Jiu, he took a sip of water, but his eyes swept over Fu Jiu with obvious disdain in his eyes. Stand there. The physics teacher sat down in her seat, let out a long sigh, and said to Fu Jiu, after what happened last time, the school has paid more attention to the treatment of students. If it's not something particularly important, we won't talk to the students. I can understand that everyone wants to get good grades, but the teachers aren't blind, and they have the basic judgment of every student. Now that all the class teachers are here, we all suspect that there's something wrong with your grades. Fu Jiu, can you tell us how you got your grades this time? I've just said that the school has paid a lot of attention to the treatment of students. Chapter 198. Compared to the exasperated teacher, Fu Jiu's attitude was much calmer. She had one hand in her pocket, looking cool and handsome, and her voice was very cold. She only said 2 words to the teacher. Tutoring. Tutoring? That physics teacher sneered. I don't know what tricks your mom used to know the content of the exam in advance. The school did not do a good job in this area, but everyone knows that it's impossible to go from knowing nothing to getting full marks in just 7 days. This is simply a fantasy. What kind of tutoring teacher can do that? If there were such tutoring teachers, what would we, the teachers, do for? As soon as the physics teacher finished speaking, the other teachers also sneered. If there were such tutoring teachers, I, Old Lee, would resign and let him teach at number 1 middle school. Exactly. If you want to lie, say something practical. What's the point of a lie that can be seen through so easily? Haha, our school should also investigate who was the one who sold these questions. Our dignified A class didn't even score as much as the last place. Who would believe this? That director wasn't too agitated. After all, last time's incident was too big, and he didn't want to take any more risks or responsibilities. How about this, Fu Jiu? Call your parents here first. This matter has to be solved. Fu Jiu's thin lips curled up even more, and she lowered her voice. Solved. How? Are you going to fire all these teachers who slandered me? Fire? That teacher was amused. Fu Jiu, Ms. Zhang is here, and she knows your learning situation the best. Fine, you can say that we are slandering you, but are your teachers slandering you too? Ms. Zhang was the physics teacher in Fu Jiu's class. She looked down on Fu Jiu from the bottom of her heart, so when all the teachers came to her, she had no intention of protecting Fu Jiu. She was different from the English teacher, and she didn't believe that Fu Jiu could get full marks. Fu Jiu, you either admit your mistake, or call your parents here. Hearing that, Fu Jiu's eyes narrowed completely. At that moment, her eyes seemed to be overflowing with a dark mist. The phone in her pocket had been vibrating since just now, but she didn't care. The teacher next to her was annoyed. Now, call your mom immediately. Fu Jiu suddenly laughed, and her eyes were cold. You don't have to call my mom for this kind of thing. As she spoke, she took out her phone, pressed the answer button, and put it to her ear. Hello, Brother Mo. Where are you? The man's voice sounded like a high-grade red wine that had been frozen in a refrigerator. Even through the phone, one could feel the chill that seeped out from it. Fu Jiu's smile was still there, and she said casually, I was called to the office by the teachers, so I didn't pick up the phone. They insisted that I cheated on the test and asked me to call my parents. Chapter 200. How could this be? Who would have thought that Fu Jiu's tutor was young Master Qin? Regret was not enough to express how the teachers were feeling right now. Their faces were all red, and they wanted to find a hole to hide in. This slap in the face was really embarrassing. Because everyone knew how good Qin Mo was, not because of his family background, but because of his inhuman grades and IQ. Looking at those physics questions that had been suppressed, the grade director suddenly remembered that young Master Qin did ask him about the physics course not long ago, and he also mentioned the problem of male and female deskmates. At that time, he always thought that young Master Qin did it for his girlfriend. Now it seemed, could it be for Fu Jiu? Thinking of this, the grade director's eyes shook violently. They really screwed up today, and it was very likely that they had wrongly accused someone. The physics teacher in Fu Jiu's class wanted to explain for the other teachers. Unfortunately, Almighty Qin was never a person who would give others a chance in this aspect. He took off the black glove on his left hand, lifted his eyelids and said indifferently, I heard that the teachers wouldn't let it go until he called his parents over. Since we're done with the tutoring, let's talk about you guys slandering my little brother for cheating. Little brother? Everyone present was shocked again. When did this upstart Fu Jiu become young Master Qin's little brother? Every teacher was speechless at that moment, and their throats felt like they were choked by something. Qin Mo raised his good-looking eyebrows. What? You don't want to talk about it? At this point, Qin Mo tilted his head and laughed. His voice was still graceful, but it was bone-chilling. That's not up to you. My little brother is in the rebellious phase of adolescence. Psychologically speaking, this is the time when his mental endurance is at its weakest. As a teacher, if a student gets full marks, you don't praise him, but slander him indiscriminately. This will easily cast a shadow on him. Fu Jiu. Although she really shouldn't have interrupted at this time. But how did the Almighty know that she was in the rebellious phase of adolescence? Qin Mo didn't look at the young man's eye contact. Even if he did, he would think that the young man was being bullied. This was the first time he came to school as a parent, so of course he couldn't let things develop like this. He continued to say indifferently, Director Lee, when did the teaching quality of number 1 middle school fall to this level? As a shareholder, how could I not know? As soon as the year head heard the man call him out, he broke out in a cold sweat. Young Master Qin, this matter. Do you want to settle this privately or publicly? Qin Mo didn't wait for him to finish. He glanced at the few teachers standing at the side. They seemed to be well-mannered. However, every teacher knew in their hearts that regardless of whether this matter was settled privately or publicly, they would no longer be able to work in number 1 middle school. Especially teacher Zhang, who taught Fu Jiu physics. The blood drained from her face rapidly, and her skin was as pale as a thin piece of paper. Young Master Qin, we just thought that a poor student wouldn't be able to do so well, so we wanted student Fu Jiu to explain herself. We didn't mean to slander her. Chapter 202. The school leaders were now experiencing what it meant to be a cold winter. Qin Mo sat on the leather chair with a calm expression on his face, but every word he said struck them straight in their hearts. The school leaders' hands were shaking when they left. From that day on, the school began to treat all students equally, regardless of whether they were good or bad. They would take care of those who needed to be disciplined, but they wouldn't discriminate against bad students. If any teacher still existed, they would be fired immediately. In the classroom, some students who didn't understand had already left. Only Shui Yaoyao was still waiting. After all, His Highness Jiu's bag was still there, so he would come back sooner or later. She was worried that the physics teacher called His Highness Jiu away. Could it be that there was something wrong with the monthly test? Everyone who participated in the esports competition knew that the results of this monthly test were very important to them. If something happened to His Highness Jiu, then their team, without His Highness Jiu, the He family army, would no longer have any meaning. Shui Yaoyao thought of this and stood up. She wanted to go to the office to have a look. As soon as the wooden door opened, she saw the clean and handsome face of the young man. Shui Yaoyao's eyes lit up. His Highness Jiu, are you okay? The teacher called you. Before she could finish, she saw the man behind the young man and stopped abruptly. Almighty Qin? Why was he here? It wasn't hard to see the surprise on Shui Yaoyao's face. But Fu Jiu just smiled lightly. I'm fine. I came to get my bag. With that, Fu Jiu walked over, casually pulled her left hand, and threw the bag over her shoulder. She still had one hand in her trouser pocket. That posture was always very cool. After all, Shui Yaoyao knew Fu Jiu's gender. She felt a little guilty when she saw Almighty Qin, but after seeing the series of actions of His Highness Jiu, she felt that there was no need to feel guilty. His Highness Jiu's handsomeness was something that others couldn't learn. Almighty Qin probably wouldn't think that His Highness Jiu was a girl. Let's go together. Fu Jiu walked back and touched Shui Yaoyao's head. Brother Mo and I will send you back. She touched her head. Shui Yaoyao blushed. Even though she knew that His Highness Jiu was a girl, she couldn't help but be attracted by that tone. But as soon as she looked up, she saw Almighty Qin's cold and handsome face. His gaze swept over Highness Jiu's hand, and his thin lips seemed to be raised. But Shui Yaoyao felt the coldness in his smile, and her scalp went numb. She immediately said, Your Highness Jiu, you don't have to send me off. I also have an appointment with a classmate to eat ice, so I'll be leaving first. See you later. Almighty Qin's gaze was too terrifying. It was even more terrifying than before. Just because His Highness Jiu touched her head. Chapter 204. Lollipops. The shop assistant smiled brightly. Are you buying them for your kid? Fu Jiu knew that the Almighty was buying them for her the moment she heard the flavor, and she was about to deny it. But the Almighty's cool and magnetic voice came over again, and he said slowly and elegantly, Yeah, I'm buying them for my kid. The Almighty definitely did it on purpose, or he wouldn't have glanced at her when he said the word, kid. The shop assistant had seen many adults buying candy for kids, but it was rare to see two as young as the two in front of her. She couldn't help but ask, Sir, how old is your kid? We have to choose candy according to his age, especially since you want a chocolate flavor. This kind of candy is not suitable for young kids. 17. After Qin Mo spat out his age. Not only the shop assistant, but also the kids in the shop were stunned. They asked with their eyes wide open. 17? How old is that? I'm 3 years old this year. 1 3-year-old is 3 years old. 2 3-year-olds are 6 years old. 3 3-year-olds are 9 years old. 4 3-year-olds. 4 3-year-olds. A little radish head was still counting with his fingers. In the end, he became anxious. He puffed up his cheeks and stomped his feet. What if 4 3-year-olds aren't enough? 4 3-year-olds indeed weren't enough. It was really hard for kids. The shop assistant cleared his throat with difficulty, as if he was making a final confirmation. Sir, did you say 17? Not 7? Yeah. After Qin Mo responded, he pushed the young man forward and curled his thin lips. Although his behavior of eating candy is childish like a 7-year-old, his face is indeed 17. Fujiao. She was sure that the Almighty came to buy candy just to mock her more vividly. The shop assistant saw the man's movement and realized that the candy was for the young man. He paused and smiled apologetically. Please wait a moment. I'll go get the candy for you. Hearing that, the little boy lowered his head as if he was having an important meeting. He said in a deep voice, "Did you see that? That big brother is buying candy for the pretty brother in his hand." I saw it. I think it's a trap. I think it's a trap. It's definitely a trap. Should we tell beautiful brother not to take it? I don't think it's a good idea. Beautiful brother looks like he wants to eat it. Sigh, I can understand him. When I don't have any candy to eat, I have the same expression. Fujiao. What's wrong with her expression? Wasn't he still handsome? Also, kids over there, when you whisper to each other, can you lower your volume a little? However, having a big bag of lollipops to eat was indeed a very happy thing. Moreover, this brand of chocolate was very pure. When mixed with sweets, it would create a wonderful taste. After Qin Mo paid the bill, Fujiao tore one out and put it in her mouth.